All right, well, welcome. Hope everyone had an enjoyable morning. I thought it was a really informative piece this morning. Unfortunately, I missed the keynote, so I'm looking forward to the video. Anyway, I was asked to speak about the course that I'm teaching here, and I've been teaching it for about 10 years. It's Arts 111, Career Development and Decision Making. And the focus of the course is to help students with their career exploration and decision making. That said, it is for academic credit. And the focus is to help students become more career conscious early as possible. This is actually a slide I use in the first day of class. To help them understand themselves better so they can make better informed decisions, and in some cases maybe help to confirm a path that they're already on, or help alert them to the fact that maybe they're not on the right path, and to just begin the whole planning process. So those are the basic reasons for the course, and I just wanted to give a bit of a background on that. A little bit more about the course. There are 85 students in it. It's focused on first-year students, but I do get representation from second, third, and fourth-year students as well. It is for credit, as I mentioned, and the goals of the students coming vary. So, challenges look remarkably like the previous screen. Challenges, 85 students when you're really trying to help each student with their career direction. That's an unwieldy number. Ideally, there would be 30 in the course. So looking for ways to help improve the communication with them and reaching the students, which is going to lead us to the ePortfolio in a moment. The fact that there are students from different years. Again, it's focused on first-year students, but fourth-year students have a little bit different perspectives and everything in between. The fact that it's for credit can be challenging from my perspective in that walking that line between, okay, this is for academic credit, so we need to be doing things that are worthy of credit, but at the same time wanting to help you with your career exploration. So that's been a struggle over the years. It was very, very academic before, and now it's moving more to the practical, I would say. And the fact that I would say maybe half the class are there because they really do want to do something about their career exploration. Oh, I like that. Thank you. Okay. But then again, there are students there for different reasons. We won't go into a lot of those. I'm guessing you can guess what some of those might be. Career course. I wonder if that's like that little fluffy grade 10 course we took. So I also know that some of those students are career falsely decided. Okay. We have lots of those students on this campus. They're on a mission to something that really doesn't make sense for them. So it's my mission to try to reach them too. So looking for ways to force them to self-assess and evaluate and reflect so that perhaps they could then wake up to the fact that, gee, what I'm deciding to do doesn't really make sense for me. So that led me to coming up with different kinds of assessment activities. So that was kind of the phase one. And each one's worth 2%, so I had 10 of them. So that ended up being 20% really easy marks. Basically, if they did it, they got 2%. And quite often I had the TAs mark those. But then I had the odd student who would say, you know, I'd really like it if another student didn't look at this. I would like you to only look at it. So in looking at them, I started seeing that sometimes they're just kind of doing the bare minimum and just handing it in and getting 2% and obviously not getting anything out of it. So that was concerning. The quality of them then was not great. And then I noticed on the midterms, I decided to start including some short answers in addition to those multiple choice questions, and asking them questions that were quite basic but designed to make sure that they were getting out of it what I was hoping they would. For example, what's your MBTI type and what does that say about you? I was appalled at how few people could answer the question, and yet they'd had an assessment and supposedly thought about it, but they weren't. So I was getting quite discouraged about that and thinking, okay, obviously I need to do something different here. They need to be forced to do more reflection on these actual assessments and activities. So, enter the ePortfolio. So as I'm ruminating over this, and I really was ruminating over it, Catherine Lithgow came along, 2012. We have ePortfolios and there's reflection opportunities here. I immediately got very excited and being me, It was the beginning of September, and I decided I want to do this term. So thank you so much, Catherine, for putting up with me and scrambling to help me get it up and running for the class in the fall 2012. And I decided I was going to mark them all. And I thought I was crazy, but after listening to some of the people this morning and how many that they look at, I guess I'm not, or else we all are. But I have enjoyed reading the students' reflections. And maybe it's partly because I'm reading them, they are going much deeper. And I'm seeing a real trend to actually reflecting on their assessment results. And I now have 15 of them. They're worth 2%, but they don't automatically get 2%. And a funny one, last Friday night, marking, of course, because that's all I do, I read to students and I thought, this is really pathetic. I gave them 1 out of 2, and a little note that, I'm looking for a little bit more detail and elaboration here, like what makes you say this, et cetera, et cetera. Within 60 seconds, he had emailed me and said, I am so sorry for the crummy reflection that I submitted. I promise that the next one will be better. And I thought, well, that's good. And I emailed him and I said, that's great. Of course, my main concern is that you are actually getting something out of it, not that it's necessarily going to be 2 marks. But that's the kind of thing that I am seeing. So I did bring along a student from last term, Deborah. I always called you Sharand, and I guess I was way off with that. So we'll just say Deborah. She's agreed to show one of her submissions and to talk about how it has helped her. So I'll invite you up, Deborah. Okay.
So I'm Deborah Sharinde. Nice to meet you guys. I was lucky enough to take the Arts 111 course last semester. It was a very interesting course. I was one of those students who was like, oh, I'll just take this course. But it actually really, really helped me because it allowed me to really spend some time looking inwards, spend some time thinking about what I wanted to do. I was one of those art students who came in kind of confused, kind of not really sure what I was going to do. And this course allowed me to really learn about specific things that were for me, that would suit me. But I think the thing about ePortfolio that I really found really interesting was the way it helped us consolidate what we learned in class. So we would go over things in class, but then going through the ePortfolio, it meant that it gave me time as an individual to spend time going over what I'd learned and also relate it back to myself. I think that sometimes especially first year courses, you can get a lot of courses that are about memorization and about the professor directing you. But this course through the ePortfolio really did allow me to take a bit more control over my own learning. So this is Type Focus. Type Focus is an assessment that I took in the Arts 111 course, and this is my reflection on it. And my favorite thing about the Type Focus reflection was that it allowed me to see how Type Focus measures your Myers-Briggs personality. And it allowed me to see how similar I was to my personality, but how different I was to my personality, and how this could funnel into my career choices. So through doing the reflection, I don't think I would be able to realize myself in my personality type as much. And it really gave me the chance to reflect on the specific things within this personality type that were like me. I spoke to several people, obviously, being in class about the reflections, and one thing that I did realize a lot was that people who really, really put and were encouraged to put their all into the reflections really did get a lot out of it. And some people were confused. Some people were like, oh, now I don't know what to do. This is terrible. But I think it's probably better than terrible because it allowed them, before they made the mistake of entering into something that they didn't want to do, these reflections in ePortfolio allowed them to take a step back and really decide if this is really fit for me. So I think ePortfolio gives students the opportunity to take control a bit and really get involved in more of their decision making for careers. So I really like it. So yeah.
Thanks, Deborah. Okay, thank you. I guess. So I'm glad you mentioned about some students being a little upset, because that has happened pretty much every term. Most of the time they're thankful that their eyes have been opened to the fact that they were kind of traveling down the wrong path. Other times they've been a little angry with me for having forced them to re-examine themselves and come up with that. But as Deborah said, I think that's probably a good thing. It's better to know now rather than to keep on going and find out later. You can also see from this screenshot the 15 different assessments that I asked them to do. Well, actually, if they want to get marks, they probably have to do them. And there may be one a week, sometimes 2 a week. And as I said, I mark them all and I try to give them feedback. And we start with a career thoughts inventory and end with that measures their dysfunctional thinking around career decision making. We can see with the last one that there is almost always improvement and significant improvement, and they reflect on that. You can see for this particular one, type focus, I call the artifacts the sort of the raw data that they get out of their assessment or the particular activity, and then the reflection questions that actually get them to go deeper and think about what that actually means. And as I said before I did this, they would come up with their 4-letter personality type, and that didn't mean anything to them, and they couldn't talk about it on a midterm or in the final paper where they're gathering everything together. So some of them are actually assessments, some of them are activities, like a lifeline activity where they talk about, positive and negative events that have happened to them in their lives and how these may have impacted them in a career sense. And so I also have 2 activities that get them to pull everything together. I know that I'm running out of time, right? So this is one of them. And it says, based on all the information you've gathered, draft a statement that captures all these key salient things about you. So they've looked at their values, they've looked at their skills, the ones that they enjoy using, not just have, their preferences, their personality, characteristics. So it is an attempt to pull everything together and make sense out of it and use that as sort of a compass to carry forward with their career decision making. So that's essentially what's in the ePortfolio and how I'm using it. It is a work in progress, and I know there's so much more I can be doing with it, but I am really pleased to see now the midterm, the short answers, almost everybody gets them. They know now, and it means something to them. And the reflections themselves have been getting better and better and better. So part of that may be that I'm marking them and not a TA, but I think it's also the fact that they are being forced to really reflect and that they don't automatically get 2% just for doing it. It needs to actually reflect reflection. So just sort of in finishing, I would say recommendations, if you're going to use them, do make sure you provide very clear directions, because especially the first year students who aren't used to this at all seem to really struggle with it. And also, I don't know how many times I've had students partway through the term suddenly wake up to the fact that they're not getting any marks, and that's because they thought I could see their ePortfolio. They didn't actually submit the presentation to the Arts 111 Dropbox, and that's the only way I can see it. So they have to submit it for the instructor to see it. Also, you might want to show them previous examples. I had a student say, so how long should these reflections be? What's the word count? I said, well, there's no word count. It's just however long it takes you to really reflect on this. But how long should it be? So really needing some concrete guidelines. I still don't think I can give that, but I think showing some previous good examples of varying lengths might be helpful. And also, I think a big one is to remind them that they have this after the course. I had a student contact me last term saying they had an interview coming up and they knew there was some good stuff in their ePortfolio that would help them with their interview, but they didn't know how to access it. So they were very happy to learn that they could. Just because the course is over doesn't mean that they're cut off from it. They have it for life, basically, I guess. So those are just some things that I have found that are really important to get across. Okay. So I don't suppose we have time for questions. Do you want to save that till later, or?
No.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
So are you using the ePortfolio? All of those questions you could have done as straight Dropbox questions, right? So what is the advantage of the ePortfolio, that they can hold on to it afterwards, or that provides it all in one space? Because you could just. Oh, I'm sorry. So, right, so you use the ePortfolio as opposed to using the, just a Dropbox for those questions that you're grading. And it creates an extra step for the students, that they have to do it in one space and then bring it into another space. So I'm just wondering, I'd like to hear more clearly what you think the advantage is then to that, as opposed to just doing it straight.
Into the Dropbox. I would say basically two reasons. One, that they will have that for good, and it could help them with their job search, resumes, etc. And it's not lost to them once Arts 111 is finished for the term. And also, I have had some students come back and say, you know, I struggled with the reflections as we went through, and I really didn't put a lot of really deep thought into it. And now, looking back on it and going back into this ePortfolio, I can see so much there that I didn't really bring together at the time. So looking back on it in retrospect, getting more out of it even then than during the course. So I think it's important that they do have it, even having done it in first year and going back in fourth year, which they wouldn't have done yet because it hasn't been around long enough. But to be able to go back and go, oh yeah, and like I did this assessment and it really clearly showed these values. So that is really important for me to be thinking about right now. Whereas if it was in the course and it was gone, they wouldn't really have that to access. Does that answer the question?
Oh, that's what you're
Yeah, that's my argument. Yep. Okay. Yes.
Would you mind passing the mic just so those that are listening in? Yep.
Thank you. I haven't yet used ePortfolio, but as Catherine knows, I have aspirations. I'm a little confused. You don't have access to the whole ePortfolio, you just have access to the individual submissions?
Yeah, so their ePortfolio exists out there. It's theirs outside of all the courses. So I can't access it, only the stuff that they want me to see. So that's what I've asked them to submit to Arts 111 Dropbox.
So, for example, if you were doing something like using it for an undergraduate thesis development proposal, and you would like to, instead of having the old-fashioned binders and your students bringing that into your course, you could use it theoretically that way, and you could see the cumulative work that's being done, and then mark the whole thing at the end of the term.
They can make it available to you.
And you
Like
can
the
do
whole
that
thing,
in the
if they
spring.
want, I believe. Is that not true? Yes.
Yes, so really, if you think about it almost as your course site. So not everybody on campus can see your course site. This is their space. And so they can put in, they could have a whole bunch of these presentations there. The only way that that you have access to them is if they put it in your Dropbox or they actually take steps to share it with you. But you wouldn't have access to everything that they put in. It's a very student-centered.
So you couldn't make that sort of the requirement that they develop an ePortfolio for your course that you mark?
Oh, for sure.
Or
You
you
you can make it a
Okay.
requirement that in this course, you're going to have to show me X, Y, and Z. If you've got A, B, and C in there, I don't know that. But for this course, I need to see X, Y, and Z. So that's a requirement.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
you can't actually mark the ePortfolio.
You can't actually mark the working space of it, but if they've put it in a this presentation, so the several pages, so if it was a thesis thing, I would see, you know, the various steps or check-ins. You would be able to see all of that if they have added.
But you
it.
couldn't actually grade it so that, oh, sorry. Great. You can't actually grade it so that you know, when you mark a Dropbox, the grade goes into the grade book. You're not grading anything. There's
The
no
only-
grading feature in the portfolio.
You won't be able to see it. You're going to have them submit it to the Dropbox anyway. So yes, you could mark. You could look at the submission, put your mark in the Dropbox, and it will go into the grade
Right,
book.
but you can't, so I just want to be clear, we
Yeah.
can't actually grade the portfolio directly.
Yeah, Jane's grading.
But
that
she's saying she's
presentation,
grading it by
all
putting it
has to
into
do-
the Dropbox. I'm saying you go into the ePortfolio as a professor or instructor, and you grade right in the ePortfolio, the way you grade in quizzes, the way you grade in Dropbox.
So,
No, I don't think so.
One thing that might help is it's kind of thinking, you seem to be thinking of ePortfolio as one thing, but really the ePortfolio tool is like the student space where they could have a whole bunch of stuff, some of which is relevant to your course, other stuff which is not relevant to your course that might be for other courses. And then they choose what they want from what is there to present to you, to say, okay, here's my ePortfolio for Skidmore,
Yeah.
or here's my ePortfolio for Arts 111 or whatever. So you essentially you're curating and selecting different pieces to present to people. So you could make different different presentations of stuff to different people if you wanted to. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. So, okay, so a student makes a presentation for Skidmore. It has to then be, the student has to then do whatever clicking's involved to put it into the Dropbox for the course.
Or share it.
Or share it.
Yeah.
So say the student shares it with me as opposed to putting it into a Dropbox, and I can then go in and look at the presentation in the ePortfolio environment. Can I grade it there?
There are rubrics that you could fill out, but will that go over to the grade book? No. So the only thing that will actually, you can add a mark to and flip it over is the Dropbox.
If they take it into the Dropbox.
Jason,
Thank
yes.
If I may jump in here, so one of the key things, you grade using the Dropbox currently, you have submissions in the Dropbox? It would be the same thing for you. You would go to the Dropbox, instead of clicking on that file, which is a Word doc or a PowerPoint, you'd be clicking on the file and it would open this presentation. You'd mark it in the Dropbox like you normally do, rubric or no rubric. When you do that, it goes into the gradebook. The student space is intact. They've decided this is the presentation I'm creating for you, submit it to the Dropbox. They go to add file, click on ePortfolio, click on the thing, it's just like adding a file. So the process is quite easy for them and for you if it's used in the Dropbox. Right? Did that make sense?
It also creates a snapshot of that presentation, whereas when they share, it's live. So if they're making changes to that live presentation, you could be looking at and see those changes. In the Dropbox, it's static. So for grades, it helps.
I almost think of it as someone's computer. I mean, they could type the essay up, keep it on their computer. You're not going to be able to see it until somehow they give you the paper, so you can't mark it on their computer either. So. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Deborah, for sharing that with us.